The Tale of the Three Fathers and the Golden Fish by John Fried.
What kind of father leaves his children wandering in the dark woods and flies off a hungry owl? Our setting is a kabak, a country tavern near Imperial Russia's Odessa in a December at the end of the 18th century. In the corner is a cast iron stove which struggles to heat the space. Sean, the bartender, takes a log off the bar and carefully adds it to the dwindling fire. Hans is sitting at the bar with a number of small logs in a canvas carrier on the stool next to him. He is balancing a full jigger shot glass in one hand and a full beer stein in the other. He knocks the shot back and quickly chases it with the beer and says, "Again." Hans places another log on the bar from the carrier, and Sean gives him a handful of beans before refilling the shot glass and the stein. "Your change." Hans carefully puts the beans in his pocket. Sean adds that log to the fire as well. Hans quickly downs the shot and the beer chaser and reaches for another log. "Again." Not till you tell me what's troubling you." "This morning I led my little Hansel and Gretel into the most desolate part of the forest and left them there alone." "Oh, how could you do such a thing?" "Blame it on this ceaseless famine and their stepmother. Yesterday was her last straw when my children discovered her hoard of food under the floorboards. They had pulled out a loaf of bread and were attempting to cut it with our sharpest knife. The bread did not want to be cut. Even my axe just bounced off it. When my wife returned, she shrieked as if she had seen the floor covered with rats. That night, she whispered to me how she was going to solve the problem. She'd wrap the children tightly in burlap and toss them into the river like a sack full of puppies. She was certain that the river would dispose of them properly in the sea." "Ah, what did you do?" "Well, I woke very early in this morning and walked with the children into the deepest part of the woods. I blindfolded them and told them to count to 100. Then I ran away as fast as my legs would carry me. Who knows? The fairies might take pity on them, or they'll mercifully die in their sleep from the cold night air. Either way, it's no longer my fault." "Hans, my friend, maybe you made the wrong decision. And what did your wife say when you returned without the children?" "Oh, not a word. I simply showed her my axe, which I had covered with blood from a stumbling deer. She just nodded and produced a jar of peaches from under the floorboards." "Oh, then what did you do?" "Oh, I gathered these logs and came here." Sean pours him another shot and refills the stein. Lord Ella enters the tavern with the complaining cackle of young women's voices heard from outside. He calls back to them, "I'll only be a minute. Hold on to each other's hands." "Ah, Hans, I have been looking all over for you. I need as much wood as you can sell me." "Oh, isn't that Cinderella's job?" Sean interrupts Hans. "Hadn't you heard? The princes locked Cinderella up in the palace. They are to be married." "Oh, that's very good news, isn't it?" Lord Ella objects. "Oh, no, absolutely the reverse. My wife, she is making me take on all of Cinderella's chores." "Oh, can't her stepsisters help?" No. They are another disaster. Weirdly, a flock of birds delivered the news of the prince's engagement to our garden, and then they picked out the girl's eyes. I am charged with keeping them out of their mother's sight at all times so she won't be upset. They're tied up to the hitching post out front right now. So, could we be quick? I have to hurry back and start the dinner fire, or there will be hell to pay. Lord Ella notices the wood on the bar stool next to Hans and takes out a huge wad of bills. Oh, that stack should be sufficient. I will give you 100 francs for each log. Your money means nothing to me. There's nothing to buy to eat anywhere at any price. Oh, what else do I have that you could possibly want or need? Well, my boots are so worn that the hobnails cut into my heels. I will trade you a log for each of your shoes. Lord Ella exchanges his shoes for 2 of Hans's logs and puts his bill on Sean's bar. Barkeep, will all this money buy me a drink? No. But your hat will, and that paper money can be useful for rekindling the fire. The ornate hat is exchanged for a stein of beer. Sean turns to feed the money into the stove to stoke up the fire when Lord Ella taps him on the back. Pardon. I used to know you, didn't I? Long ago, when people called you Jacques, the giant killer. The story went that you were rich as Midas because you had stolen from a giant living in the sky a miraculous hen that laid golden eggs. How is it that you're now a lowly bartender? Well, actually, 'twas a goose, not a hen. And the story is rather an embarrassing one. Before I start, I want to make it clear, no giant was ever armed in its making. Cinderella always loved your, should I call it Jacques' story. I'm sure it's what kept her going during all those years of drudgery after her mother died. Oh, I think that's why so many people have stuck to the original version, even when it turned out to be such a pack of transparent lies. But let me set the record straight. Times were a lot like now. Drought, famine, and widespread desolation. Of course, I was much younger then and was failing miserably to provide for me widowed mother and Milky White, the cow I loved since she was a calf. Could you start with Once Upon a Time? Oh, Hans, I'd rather begin with that famous goose that was mistranslated into a hen. Now, mind you, all this happened after I traded our perfectly healthy cow for a couple of supposedly magical beans. I couldn't face me loving mother after such a foolish and potentially fatal error of judgment. So I hid out for a couple of days. While in the woods, I was attacked by a goose when I almost stepped on her nest. I wrestled her to the ground. When I spotted the 3 eggs she was protecting, alternative endings began to populate me mind. A goose that laid eggs for a dry cow wasn't a great bargain, but not as bad as the bean one I had made. And a goose that laid solid gold eggs now would be the best deal of all. But since no one had ever heard of such a thing, it had to have come from some other fantastic world where an enormous giant's castle might be able to hover hidden above the clouds. Well, once the main elements were worked out, the diverting details were fairly easy. Had a bit of cold paint and a now tamed goose under me arm, and me mother bought the whole story. Of course, she couldn't resist spreading the fabulous news about her brilliant son to the villagers. The neighbors in turn brought us gifts of food and drink just to marvel at that goose in her cage sitting on those golden eggs. Oh, it is good that you got some food out of your trick. Aye, and I got to marry the most beautiful girl in the whole region. Oh, I hadn't heard that part. How did that come about? Lord Ella, we're almost there. Within days, me giant story flooded the whole valley, and when the father of the most beautiful young girl in the entire province heard it, he stole a horse, swung up his daughter up behind him, and galloped to our house. It took no more than an hour for him to negotiate my marriage contract with my mother. The girl's radiant beauty was all the prospects for greater fortune her family possessed, who were living huddled like field mice on the village commons. For me, she was the kind of treasure that dragons protected and worth any betrayal she might cost. We were married the next afternoon. Hooray for Jack! Oh, restrain your enthusiasm, Hans. Before the evening's consummation, both our worlds would crack open like the painted eggs delivering their squawking goslings. So you see, Lord Ella, 'twas all a sack of lies and a fraud to boot, one that totally ruined me wife's family and nearly me own. How does any of this explain how you got here? Well, I'm coming to that. I tried to escape our embarrassment by changing my name from Jack to Sean, and cart and all we had left to a distant village. My mother preferred to stay in the empty hut, and she slowly turned to dust. I, however, could not escape the punishment for me deceptions so easily, which was being lashed daily by my wife's whip-like tongue. And instead of gazing lovingly at a beautiful woman's face, I had to stare at the stone face of an angry gargoyle. In order to survive, I attempted to master the art of serving her unconditionally. What happened to the goose? Now, all those geese hunts did help us celebrate a few Christmases, and planting those idiotic beans preserved what was left of our miserable lives for many years to come. That is good. Ella, you are really losing me now. How did that lead you to this tavern? Oh, spare me a few more minutes. The train of events is about to arrive at our destination. Nearly all of those beanstalks dried up during the next drought, and me devil's face of a wife spewed such venom that I decided to silence her by throwing myself in the sea. As I walked to the water's edge, I came across a deserted fishing net that wanted repair. This I braided and idly cast into the waves to see what fortune still had in store for me. The first time, all I hauled in was slime. The second time, all there was seaweed. But the third time was a charm, and in me net was a golden fish as large as a child. But 'twas no ordinary fish. She begged and implored me in a human woman's voice to release her back into the sea. Well, starving as I was, I hesitated and did not say a word in response. She spoke on that if I freed her, in return she would grant anything I would so desire. In a voice that I used to use with my milky white, I said, I'll be with you, you golden fish. I don't need your golden ransom. Off you go into the deep blue sea. Swim free, swim where you seek to be. I released her and returned to the house to tell everyone about my wondrously strange encounter. When me wife heard the tale, she screamed, Weakling, were you too frightened by a mere fish now from taking the offered reward? Return immediately and demand a cornucopia of a garden, so that we will not perish when winter sets in. And one more thing, command that fish to make me a mother without you touching me. So I went back to the sea, which seemed more troubled, and called out for the golden fish. She swam up and sweetly questioned if I lacked anything. Have mercy on me. Me wife is cursing and scolding me. She gives me no peace. Would you calm her with a richly fruitful garden so that we could survive the winter and also make her a mother? Oh, take heart, good man, when you return. You will find yourself and wife satisfied with what she desires. I went back to me wife, but she was cursing more fiercely than ever. Simpleton son of a fool, all you got from the fish was a garden full of vegetables that I have to attend to night and day, as pregnant as I am. Go on back to the fish and tell her I don't want to be a lowly peasant any longer, but instead a noble lady with a castle and servants galore. I did as I was told, and when I returned, my very pregnant wife was standing on the porch of a grand house wearing a coat trimmed in sable, and on her head was a brocade headdress, and round her neck hung gems the size of quail eggs and gold rings circling all 10 fingers. Before her stood many zealous serfs and servants. She was caning them and pulling their hair for sport. I hope you've gotten all you want now, I said. And then her lackeys beat me and packed me off to sleep in the stables with horses and carved carriages fit for a princess. A week later, she herself came to the stables and slapped me awake. Get up, you good for nothing. My servants all bore me. I want to become Empress of the Sea with a golden fish as my attendant, to present whatever I want without your constant delays. Take me to her right now. The moment we approached the blue sea, a storm turned it black with crashing waves and howling winds, forcing my pleading voice into a yell. Have mercy on me, golden fish. My wife will only be content when you transform her into the Empress of the Sea. I heard a voice coming from the waves. Lead her into the water and I will grant her wish. Well, I did as I was told, and the fish slapped her golden tail on the rushing surf 3 times. Was in what happened? Oh, all of me wife's fine furs and jewels dissolved away as if crafted out of salt crystals, and she was naked and smooth as a porpoise. Her nagging, chattering even sounded like an angry porpoise, and with the most animal sound I had ever heard, expelled her baby onto the waters near the beach. I waded out to catch it and held a tiny, wiggling mermaid in my hands. My wife swam off out to sea, and the golden fish came in closer and asking, would you give her to me now? She needs her own kind. Son, what did you say back to the fish? I said, I am her kind. And she said, no, you're not. You're a man. There was a long pause, and then she said, I will trade for her with something that suits you much better. Immediately, I fell deeply asleep on the sand and woke up in the back room of this tavern with Sean's pub etched in gold on the front window. So you see, this tavern story actually began when I decided to pick up that goose in the forest. Sean's story is interrupted by the Candy House witch rushing in with her still smoking apron that has cookies stuck on it in various degrees of burn. Wasser! Sean fills a pitcher of water and places it on the bar. She douses the front of the apron. He hands her a towel. What happened to you? A little girl and boy set fire to me gingerbread house with me in it. Kinder will kill you. I be Sean, and these 2 derelicts are Hans and Lord Illa. Can I stand you a real drink for you? He pours a large shot of his best Irish whiskey and sets it on the bar in front of her. I'm honored making acquaintances. I'm Fräulein House Hex. You can call me Candy. Hans puts 2 logs on the bar. Candy, will you have a shot and a beer? Lord Ella interrupts. I live in a mansion. Why don't you come home with me? I need someone to cook and care for my blind stepdaughters. You probably saw them sitting by the hitching post when you came in. Lord Ella, is it? That sounds wunderbar. I haven't eaten in days. What happened to your shoes? The story involves a ballerina princess, which I'll tell you on the way. Candy takes his arm. He picks up the 2 logs from the bar as they leave. Hans, we need to fly back to the dark woods to find your children. Sean, if the fairy gods are willing, we will. Hans delays leaving the tavern until he finishes both his beer and the witch's whiskey.